This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not dispense medical advice. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health providers if you have any questions regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking such advice because of something you have heard on this podcast. Welcome to a show that we like to call Prostate Cancer Real Talk. Did you know that in the U.S., 1 out of every 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer during his lifetime? 1 out of 8. And black men are 50% more likely to develop prostate cancer in their lifetime and twice as likely to die from the disease. But hey, we're not here to quote statistics and tell you how tough prostate cancer can be. Rather, we are here to create a supportive community of survivors. A place where we can discuss the real-life coping methods from the perspective of a married couple who are living through it day by day. Our hosts, Elle and Shay. This is Prostate Cancer Real Talk. 20 years after surgery and still living their best life, meet David and Kathie Houchens. Powered by their faith and decades-long marriage, Dave and Kathie Houchens are here to share their story of inspiration and motivation with us. They believe that prostate cancer not only affects the patient, but also their spouses, children, and extended families. Dave and Kathie are eager to share their experiences of how they faced and dealt with Dave's diagnosis of prostate cancer over 20 years ago. The subtitle here is Hope. It is our pleasure to welcome to Prostate Cancer Real Talk, Dave and Kathie Houchens.
I want to bring Kathie in. When Dave was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I know we heard from Shay over the past couple of shows and how her reaction was. Tell us a little bit about your reaction, your perspective for other wives and significant others that are going through, and family members that are going through a diagnosis of prostate cancer.
Well, I'll start by saying there is no good time to get prostate cancer. I was in my 50s, and for me, my 50s were a decade of challenge in that our last pets died, the cat and the dog. My father had just died in 1999 of cancer. So in 2001, when my husband was diagnosed, I guess I was at the same time scared, angry, not sure where I was in my faith journey, because where was God in this? I thought maybe an empty nest and moving into a new decade. Of course, he had his surgery 2 weeks after the terrible 9/11 events. So the decade of the new millennium started off with a real negative effect on me. So I had to get my act together. So my default mode for self-preservation and sanity is either music or art. So I continued getting deep into that. But at the same time, just didn't know whether to think I was going to be a widow soon. I mean, just was a scary time. Fortunately, Dave is he's the opposite on the end of the emotional scale for me. I go off and flail about and panic easily, and that's why he's the scientist and I'm the artist, because he's very measured and takes things in his stride, knows there's always another answer to the next question, and pursues and knew where to pursue the best information. And he started us going to conferences that specialized in prostate cancer. So I began to learn that, one, I was not alone in this. There's a whole community, although it was a sorority I didn't want to join. But like he said, you're in it now, so make the best of it. And we did. We started going to conferences in California, which meant a bit of travel every year. But we tried to make the best of that too. So every conference, we met new people, we met new doctors, we were able to hear the latest research. And so for us, really, prostate cancer opened a door to a journey that became a lifestyle. It put us closer together in that, whereas I guess even while we were raising our children, we kind of had our own directions in which we went. And yes, our paths crossed and we had a good relationship, but nothing like the closeness that we were going to be thrown into with prostate cancer. Because there are things you need to talk about once you get prostate cancer that maybe or maybe not, we would have actually tried to improve our intimate relationships. When you don't have to, you just go with the flow and get into routines that might become too routine. So now we were kind of reinventing how we acted on our being together with each other. And we had the common interest of the prostate cancer. Now, I won't be totally truthful if I don't say that I resisted getting dragged into the prostate cancer world. But once I realized I had some gifts to offer, and if this is part of the journey, then why not contribute when I could? And part of my journey is a spiritual journey. And I think that started from childhood when I had myself a diagnosis at age 5 that I was just not going to live. But I think starting then, I realized that I tapped into a resource of spiritual depth that got me through a lot of hard times. And so prostate cancer was one more chance to say, well, what do I not now know about God, or however you name your higher power? But for me, the name was God at the time, and still continues to be, although I've branched out from that. And I actually immersed myself in a 3-year program, which at the time, all I knew is I wanted a wider spiritual base to draw from. I ended up on the end of that 3-year commitment as a certified spiritual director, which again, basically it means the spirit is alive and directing each one of us if we tap into it. The other thing that we've learned through our experience is that every single thing that comes up in prostate cancer, there's somebody out there in the research world working on it. And even from the time that Dave was diagnosed, things have improved. The radiation he had in, was it 08 or 09, wasn't even available back in 01 when he had his surgery. So you move into whatever is the next best thing for you. Now they've got this ADT that you can take by pill, so you don't have to have the injection. They're doing so much more with scans so that you can find out sooner what you're dealing with and knock it out in the earlier stage. So there's so much hope, and I think maybe that's the biggest message in all of this is there needs to be a place where people can get together, be honest with what's going on, but also come away feeling like they can smile again, they can breathe again, they can let go of some of their tight-fisted, anxious feelings, because there is a next logical process where there's a lot of possibility.
Okay, Kathie, so you and I obviously are part of the Prostate Cancer Wives Club. So when Elle was diagnosed, I've mentioned in previous podcasts that I had a tremendous sense of sadness for him, not for myself. And I think your emotions were a little different, and we all, everybody experienced it differently. But for me, I didn't have like anger or anything. I never felt bad for myself. I just felt bad for him. I was really, really sad. So, a part of the organization and the groups that you're with, what are some of the emotions that the wives are experiencing? Because for me, and I don't know what David's lifestyle was, but Elle, extremely active. He goes to the gym, he's in the yard. He rides his bike on a bike trail for 10 miles, on Saturdays. And for me, only thing I could see was his lifestyle is getting ready to change. It's going to be so different for him. So my sadness was for him in the way that his life was going to change. I guess I put myself on the back burner, as I found out in a previous podcast with a family therapist. So I guess I put my emotions on the back burner, but immediately it was all about him. I just felt sad. So if you could just, tell just some of the emotions that you're finding that the women are experiencing through their husbands being diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Just a reminder, to ensure that you stay up to date on the latest episodes from Prostate Cancer Real Talk, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button.
Well, I think I could say that every emotion you could possibly name comes up sooner or later. Sadness, for sure. And I think the sadness that I felt was almost coupled with a feeling of, this is not fair. So it was sad for us both. And again, prostate cancer is a couple's disease. Yes, it affects the women just as much as the men. Well, not just as much, but in a different way. Yes. But as a couple, it affects you both. And so some of the sadness and some of the frustration and some of the anger and annoyance from the women that I'm talking to, a lot of it centers around men who, I mean, this is a huge blow to their self-worth and identity. And so some of the men, and this crosses the gamut of, it's not just Black men, it's not just any particular demographic of men, but some men in every demographic just don't want to talk about it. They want to take care of it, get it done, walk out the door and say, it's behind me. And because of that, they don't want their wives to tell anybody. And that would mean they don't tell their children, even if they have adult children living at home, even if they have sons. No, you're not allowed to tell. Not allowed to tell the neighbors, not allowed to tell your friends at church, not allowed to tell your sister, your other relatives. No, this is this huge secret, which then, in the experiences that I've seen, it creates an enormous burden for the wife, because where can she go with all of this frustration, all of this not knowing, all of this wishing to get more information? And women are good researchers. I mean, they are on the internet, they are looking stuff up, they are finding things out. And when the husband doesn't want to have that discussion with her, doesn't even want her to go to the doctor's visit with him, frustrated, annoyed, angry, all of that, and definitely sad. But on the other hand, I have women who have this totally other experience because their husbands are very open about it, and they tell everybody, and they want to tell their sons so that they get checked early enough, because now you've got it in your heritage. They want to tell their neighbors, because pretty soon you find out, well, this neighbor and that neighbor, they've had an experience that they haven't talked about. So once you're able to cross that barrier and open up the communication, then it's a better experience for everybody. But the other part of the emotional experience is when the men are experiencing from usually the ADT, but from some of the other treatments as well.
What is the ADT? Tell us.
Okay, so the androgen deprivation therapy. We start using initials, and honestly, between the treatments and the drugs and all the long names for things, and you end up using shortcut terms for things that are mouthful otherwise. So, and people call it hormone treatment, but it's actually removing hormones, not adding hormones. So the men get treatments, and it could be an injection, or now it could be a pill. It used to be just cut off your testicles. So at least they've gotten beyond that.
Did you literally mean cut them off?
Oh, yeah. Orchiectomy. Yep.
Wow.
That was the old time treatment.
They call that a eunuch in the Bible, I think.
Yeah, they did. Let me just say that related to removing your sex hormone, and whether it's women losing it during menopause or men losing it because of this treatment, we get moody. We get difficult to live with. There are new ways of being in a relationship that now take people by surprise. And it's like, well, how do I deal with that? He didn't used to get angry when I said something in passing, or if I tried to pat him on the back. It's like, well, who is this monster I'm living with that's not the person that I knew before all this started? I mean, I think the frustration that men feel with, especially if you have the incontinence coupled with the impotence and the erectile dysfunction, they lose their sense of self-worth. and they begin to kind of dig a little hole for themselves. And how do wives pull men out of that? I've sat with one wife, I remember, in a coffee shop while her husband went for acupuncture because he was so desperate. He needed to get out of this downward spiral of depression. And I mean, men sitting around weeping is not what wives are used to seeing. So there's a lot of complicated emotional stuff that goes on. My personal opinion is that every team of doctors and helpful professionals that get you through this experience should include a sex counselor, a marriage counselor, some kind of professional psychotherapist who can listen to the deeper emotions and help you work through those, because people turn to drink, people turn to other behaviors that just don't fit what have created the marriage up to that point. And both the wives and the husbands, and oftentimes the children who are witness to all this, need the kind of help that keeps you grounded. And yeah, life is difficult. And part of it, the big key, the main word really here is communication. Just don't stop communicating honestly as a couple. You need that.
Dave, one of the themes I guess we had for the show today was the long haulers. You guys have been in this for 20 plus years. And from your perspective, what would you say to the couples and the individuals or whoever is pending or thinking about or going through this procedure? What is your overall perspective dealing with this for the past 20 plus years? What would you have to say to someone who's wakes up one day and finds themselves in this situation? What is your perspective on that?
Important that you work closely with the doctor and not just go away and say, oh, fine, we'll see what happens. But if a man chooses active surveillance, and that's based on one, what your Gleason score was, what your PSA was, and a variety of other things. And then you have to work closely with that doctor. I've known men that have been on active surveillance for years, and I've known others that after a year or two, they say, well, I'm getting too nervous. I want to have something done. And so they go ahead with surgery or radiation to stop it. But active surveillance is just in the last 10 years has grown tremendously, where that choice didn't really exist a number of years ago. So I think it's important that the man becomes an active participant in decisions, the man and his spouse or partner, that they work together, since it is a, quote, couple's disease, in making decisions on what they think is the best approach. You know, in my case, you can say, well, I'm 20 years out, so that's great. Well, I was fortunate in that the degree of my cancer was not in the high end, and so it was manageable with the ways that I've chosen to have things done and worked on through the years. And, I will continue to have my PSA monitored. A lot of people say, well, you had your prostate out. How is it possible that your PSA is going up? Well, if it's going up, that means there's some tumor cells somewhere.
Mm-hmm. ProstateCancerRealTalk.com, ProstateCancerRealTalk.com. And if you want to contact Ellen Shay, Ellen Shay at ProstateCancerRealTalk.com. And for information on today's guests and all of our guests, once again, ProstateCancerRealTalk.com.
As I was going over the show today, the word that kept coming to my mind as it pertains to Dave and Kathie, the word that came to my mind is hope, all right? Because you have now a couple who first was diagnosed with this 20 years ago. And I think that when you get that diagnosis from the doctor, it hits you like a brick. You experience a feeling that you've never felt before. And it's a whole new thing. And like Dave just said, the instinct in many cases is I'm going to die. Okay. And that is not the case, as demonstrated by the journey that Kathie and Dave have been on. So as we draw to conclusion here, I want to hear back from Kathie in terms of any parting words that she might want to share about our discussion today, any messaging or advice that she has for the wives and the families of the men who are dealing with this.
Thanks, Elle, and Shay, too, for your wisdom in all this. But the one thing I realize I have not mentioned is the feeling of helplessness at the beginning. What can I do to make things better? And once I found my purpose in cooking and improving our nutrition, because I did research and looked into what's the best diet for prostate cancer. Well, it turns out the best diet for prostate cancer is the same diet that's good for heart health. And so the Mediterranean diet, looking into what that involved, of course, I taught Spanish for all those years, so I knew a lot about the Mediterranean and Spain. So learning how to cook, eating more fish, less red meat, more vegetables, olive oil to the exclusion of other not so good oils. There's a lot to learn about nutrition. Many of the cancer communities around, there is actually one called the Cancer Support Community. In some places it's called Gilda's Club, but they are good resources for, I get my yoga class there. They have cooking classes. They have different kinds of other events that support cancers of all kinds. But to be aware in your community what you can tap into and then take advantage of it, because much of this is free. Much of this is available now that it's on virtual platforms. I can be in Ohio attending an event in California. It's okay, and vice versa. But the two main things that I personally took on as a way to be actively involved in my husband's well-being is in the nutrition and exercise. We do walk, we do take bike rides. We love to be outdoors. He's been in the Boy Scout on that team for his whole life since he was an almost Eagle Scout as a teen, but always been active in the role of getting boys in the community involved in healthy lifestyles. So, promoting that kind of exercise and good eating and just generally good health habits beyond prostate cancer. And for women, the important thing is, yes, it's all about him, but no, it's not, because if you don't take care of yourself, then what good are you to him? So the self-care is huge. And allow yourself time off. If a nap is what you need, take it. If a little time alone just to do your art or play your music or take a walk alone in the neighborhood and notice the bird song, do it, because your mental health, your emotional health contributes to your husband's well-being.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to keep seeing more content like this from us. It will also benefit YouTube's algorithm, helping to introduce our content to others who may need it most.
Dave, what do you think about what we've done today? And do you have any closing thoughts or comments you'd like to make, advice to our listeners?
Yes, the one thing that I would advise every man that has been diagnosed and ultimately treated is to know and say that is not the end. In other words, a lot of men say, okay, I've had surgery, I'm cured. I've had radiation, I'm cured. And they don't continue to follow through. It's very important, once you've had the diagnosis of that, once you've been treated, to maintain for the rest of your life following it with PSAs on a regular basis, but then ultimately once a year, so that you can watch out for not a cure. You may or may not have been cured. I never, as a cancer researcher, like to use that word. What you're in is theoretically a long-term remission, which can go on for your whole life. You may never have a recurrence, although you might have some tumor cells there. Continue to be diligent and observant. We've said here that the first thing is, a lot of people say, well, I've got cancer, I'm going to die. Well, we're all going to die. We know that. We don't know of what or when, but ultimately, physical death will occur for everyone. Yet, we try to keep in touch with diseases that we can have some control of that might lead to death that involve much pain and suffering. So be careful, follow your medical advice, but again, you as the individual are the one that has to do that. And in couples cases, the couple's case making those decisions. So yes, search out for support groups in your area.
I just want to thank Dave and Kathie for uplifting and bringing such great joy today. You guys rock. You're awesome. Thank you so much. And you uplifted me. L case is not that bad, and I'm uplifted from the show. So I really appreciate it, and I thank you guys so very much for being with our listeners today.
We just want this podcast to be a voice and a place where people can come, a community for those of us who are going through, as Dave put it to me, the club that nobody wants to join. But I will say that it opens up your horizons. You meet a lot of great people, like we met Dave and Kathie, who we would not have met had it not been for prostate cancer. So that's a good thing. And so some good things can come from this experience.
Thank you, guys.
To reach our show, email Elle and Shay at prostatecancerrealtalk.com. That's EL and Shay, SHAY, at prostatecancerrealtalk.com.